name is Cait, and I am a trend forecaster and strategist. So a lot of my work is just basically stalking what everyone else does and not actually like using the tools themselves. But I think it helps to contextualize a lot of the semiotics and the new narratives that are happening. So a lot of my work looks at questions like how AI is going to change what we wear, how we communicate, what we do. And for this presentation in particular, I want to talk about how it's going to change the way that we love, the way that we find pleasure, and the way that we find intimacy. But hopefully not from like this kind of metaversian approach, but really in terms of I guess having a sense of control and affirmation amidst the kind of automation anxiety of like everything's changing with AI. I think with this talk being about the data and the body and our identities, I think it's important to look at it like from both sides, but really kind of showcase the optimistic and the identity affirming in this space. So before we go into how AI is affecting change in love and intimacy, I thought we could look first at how we became like data bodies ourselves and the kind of inherent relationship between technology and the body. So Dazed Future Studios reports that the internet is youth culture, technology is inside of us, phones are our homes, and screen time is soaring, which I feel like is quite obvious to all of us. We feel that deeply and we see it on our screens. But similar to smartphones, homes, and objects, we're traversing a new wave of technology, moving from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Bodies. And this offers us a lot of opportunities to interface with ourselves and connect with others. And I think optimists like to call it like infinite portals into our identities and to connect with each other. But I feel like all of us here know that that comes at the cost a lot of times to our privacy and to our autonomy. So Julia Kessler wrote a really interesting study called Bodies or Data Bodies. And she shares that the assumption that our bodies would remain invisible in the virtual sphere has left us with an unregulated communication infrastructure, creating explosive dynamics that have since become mainstream. And it's interesting because I think this has urged on a lot of really interesting activists and design futurists to start to experiment with reclaiming autonomy in their physical bodies and their data bodies in their own terms. So this has materialized into tons of really cool projects where artists have sold their digital body parts as NFTs. They're selling their DNA, their tattoos, their biometrics, and even their speculative shit on the blockchain. But it's cool because I think it has a sense of control in it. Obviously making a bit of coin isn't the end of the world, but it also kind of reclaims the power back from big tech. But I think ultimately we've always kind of been fearful of big tech on our bodies, and I think in most or like modern history, a lot of that dialogue has been led by cyber feminists. So I'm just going to do a quick cyber feminist spiel because I think it's important. So cyberfeminism was coined by the VNX Matrix in the early 90s, and at its core, the ideology aims to glitch current systems of oppression both with and through technology, using liberation of body, gender, and sexual identity as a guiding tool. They share in their manifesto: "We are the virus of the new world disorder, rupturing the symbolic from within, saboteurs of Big Daddy mindframe. The clitoris is a direct line to the matrix." So you can already see in the first wave of the internet that there's this connection with sexual liberation, with the body, with genitalia, deeply rooted into the digital space. And according to Mia London Christensen, who's a sex tech sociologist that I spoke to for a recent project, she shared that we hoped that the internet would make gender and our bodies unimportant, but it became clear that you are not without a body online. The internet is very bodily. I'm paraphrasing, but like every single time that you get online, you have to have a picture of yourself. You have to like your gender is assumed upon you. And that way it becomes very tactical and very bodied. But then going back to her quote, she says, you have to showcase yourself all the time, and we've essentially become data bodies. So knowing that our bodies and our gender and our sexuality have always been intrinsically linked to technology, what does this mean for the future of intimacy, for pleasure, and for love? So Daryl West, he wrote this book called The Future of Work, and he basically shares when the world moved from cable television and movie videos and DVs to chat rooms and video streaming and e-commerce, the sex industry was a crucial factor in the changing digital landscape. We can see this always being true. Like, the sex industry is very much an early adopter of all new technology. And we also have this rule called the Rule 34 of the internet, which basically states that if it exists, then there's porn of it. And we're already seeing a lot of industry players like Tinder and Match, and also some really cool emerging studios like Raspberry Dream Labs, looking at sex in the form of these new technologies with VR, with haptics, with NFTs, and in the metaverse. And I think it's really interesting that with the rapid emergence of AI across industries, I think it really only makes sense to look at the early workings of the tool as it pertains to sex in the sex industry in order to really query its future use. So let's start, that goes away, with the hardware. So how do our data bodies find pleasure? We'll go to this in a second, but there's a cocktail of macro trends that are changing how we find pleasure with hardware. From technical improvements with sex toys to a wider acceptance of their use, and also the safety benefits that they allow you, especially as countries around the world are restricting, limiting our abortion rights, and they're becoming some places completely non-existent. So most of us have likely seen this really cringe-inducing tool called the auto blow. Let me see if I can play it.
I'm always thinking about how to make the auto blow deliver an experience that's closer and closer to a real life sexual experience. You don't press buttons on other people to make them do things you like. Today we are going to demonstrate the first ever mind control of a sex toy.
Auto blow 1, can you come here please?
First there was the original auto blow powered by batteries in 2008. It wasn't that great. 2014.
Okay, so wait, do you want to go ahead? I'll go ahead.
Device plugs into the wall outlet. It wasn't that great. 2014 came a device plugs into the wall outlet. Next.
Okay, so this is wild, but it could be used for, he goes on to share that it could be used for people with like physical mobility challenges in order to self-pleasure in ways that feel natural and like functional to them. But outside of this kind of like a beta test creepy project, I'm more interested in kind of like the mainstream practice of AI as a tool for sex. And I think what's most interesting is how it is increasing this kind of personalization of pleasure. So just a few examples of this.
I'm always thinking about how to...
Although I'm obsessed with technology, I can't really use it, so the video thing might take a second, but here we are. So this example is from a UK-based designer called Summer Chen, and she made a line of lingerie called Enigma. Basically, it's a like text to prompt haptic lingerie that uses sensors to basically read like what's happening when you're wearing this. So like, where are you being touched? Where are you touching yourself? For how long? And then it takes all of those feelings and kind of transfers them into a erotic story that's hyper-personalized to your experience with it. I think it's really beautiful for like a sex education tool as well. So maybe if you're like wearing this and you don't really know how to communicate what you like, this could help you actually like translate the way that you're feeling like non-verbally and you can maybe explain it to someone in the future. And then this is a sex tech brand called Lovins, and they've basically just created this new ChatGPT companion that can sync up with your sex toys, and it can read out an erotic story to you, and it basically like syncs it to your sex toy, so it can start to like vibrate as the story goes on, or like change pace and change intensity. So let me show you a quick example. And let me go like here.
Library Lust Samantha and Ben have been dating for a few months now, and their sexual chemistry was off the charts.
Makes me so happy. And then this is the last one I'm going to show.
You can be someone if you grow with me. Your simple song.
All right, soundtrack is iconic, but this is a digital sex toy project by face.me, and I just show it to say that these toys are based off of all these like speculative materials of what sex toys could be. So outside of just thinking about like silicone, it's like, could you potentially have kinks outside of like wider textile or material objects, and could you make those come to life? First in the digital world, but then into the physical. Sorry, let me grab this. Where am I at? So we talk about hardware, and now I want to talk about how we will connect with our data bodies. So for centuries, humans have learned tools to non-verbally signal attraction and openness to explore interpersonal relationships with cultural signifiers such as bindis and rings. And a more modern use case of this is the pair ring, which I'm not sure if you guys have seen this, but it's basically this social experiment and it's not tech related at all, but it's basically just these green rings that you're meant to put on to showcase that you're like open to having a chat with someone. And I did some research on this, and 60% of men in the UK, their biggest fear is rejection. So for example, if someone is like wearing this ring and you wanted to go up to them and you're kind of like looking out for the ring, you can say like, oh, this person might be willing to have a chat with me because they're single or non-monogamous or what have you. Basically, they're arguing that if everyone wore these rings, rejection would be a thing of the past and we wouldn't need dating apps at all. So, where am I? So basically, again, this isn't tech-based, but I think with the use of AI and biometric wearables, it's easy to envision how something like the Pair app could be enhanced for the better. So this is an example from 2002, actually, and it's called the Brain Coat. And basically, this wearable uses proxy communication networks for wearers to communicate with each other non-verbally. And the coat like changes different colors based on your emotions, right? So anything from like affinity to embarrassment or attraction or shock. And then this is a more recent example from a design studio called Modem, which created this biometric called the breathing pod. So basically it changes shape and color in accordance with conversation partners, allowing them to become synced and establish a focused connection through their heartbeats. But how will we actually date with our data bodies? I wasn't able to find an example of this because it's on Netflix, and I looked like on the dark webs and I couldn't find anything, so I'm sorry. I'll just have to explain it. But basically, there's this show called The Future of Dating, and they set up this date where two people come together. They're wearing like these biometric wearables. They have their date, and then they go home, and instead of like running to the group chat to like kiki about what happened and get everyone's advice, they upload it into their hard drive or computer, and they're able to analyze their body's actual response and signals to that person. So it's like, okay, was I sweating? Did my heart rate go up? And it's kind of like a science-based ick radar for you to be able to understand your actual reaction to someone outside of just like intuition alone, because you know sometimes intuition doesn't lead us in the best places. So outside of biometrics, AI is acting as a personalized matchmaker too. And it's estimated that by 2027, there will be 440 million people seeking love through online platforms. And this is everything from generating alluring profile images to witty and eye-catching bios, and actually speaking on behalf of you to your human prospective partner. So these are a couple of examples. This is called Riz. It's an AI dating assistant that creates AI-generated profile pictures and AI-generated replies to online messages. This is SciMatch, which takes user-submitted images through an AI facial analyzer to recommend potential partners based on similar traits. And this one's a doozy. This is Snack App, which creates AI-trained avatars to use in videos that can chat for your matches for you. So you literally have to do nothing. Which to me seems like catfishing, like on crack. But they like to call it love at first bite. So, yet in the AI-supported search for the perfect pairing, will there be room for human error? Therapist Esther Perel, who specializes in human relationships, recently shared this in a TED Talk. So intimacy avoidance is a direct result of our dependence on AI intimacy. Dating apps that give us this hedonic list of hyper-personalized options make us incapable of tolerating imperfection. And additionally, I think this kind of like collaborative online filtering from dating app data sets basically means that the software uses general predictions based on racial, physical, and ableist biases, only recommending what users might like based on our society's standards of beauty and attraction. And recently Bumble came out with this report of this really like toxic behavior that's happening within the interwebs of the app. Basically saying that people are falsely reporting violations on other users based on identity-based discrimination. So I say this to say, even if you can use AI to find your perfect match, to talk to your match for you, to meet up with your match and understand how you're responding to this person, basically human racist love Grinches can steal your opportunity to even meeting someone in the first place, and AI completely lets this behavior prevail. Next, we're going to talk about porn. Pixel porn, actually. Because if human intimacy isn't your thing, there's thousands of apps for that. And I want to understand what you guys think. Is it erotic or chaotic? And I'm totally getting lost in my notes, so just bear with me. But since the dawn of ChatGPT, there's been a rapid onset of AI companions and a 54% increase in AI-generated erotic videos. This has sparked some really cool projects. This magazine is called Playbot, and it's by this author called Min Kim. And basically, it's the first machine-made erotic magazine exploring AI classification systems of adult content. I couldn't get a picture of this one because I couldn't download it. But annoyingly, Pornhub also did a really cool project called Remastered in 2021, where they were able to recolor and add definition to erotic films from over 125 years ago. And I think that's cool because we see porn and erotic film as being like kind of the now with the last couple of decades, but like we've been kinky for like the beginning of time. So I think it's cool to be able to see the desires of then, the visualization of erotic imagery in film then, and bring it back to today. And erotic AI audio is also on the rise with customizable experiences where users can select their exact kinks, their exact fantasies, the voices that they want. And you can also explore using AI audio to like practice role playing with this app called Bloom.
I'd start by kissing you deeply. Maybe.
Okay. I won't let us get too far into this. But this is cool because it kind of allows for that sex education, right? The ones that we didn't learn in school. Like, how do we even have these conversations that we want to have with our real intimate partners? And this app is also interesting because it allows you to have kind of like a range of gender identities and experience levels, which I think is really important because a lot of these apps are very like limited towards just like super strict like genres. So I like the kind of personalization of it. And in terms of visuals, there's also an onslaught of apps which generate adult content, including names such as Dream, GF, Porn, Joy, AI, and Porn Journey are some of the most popular ones. It's not really even worth showing examples of this because these data sets are trained on non-consensual image gathering from real people. I'm going to do it really quickly, but basically they all just look like this, the exact same person. But I think what's more interesting is on the flip side to AI generation of femme bodies from like really rigid and biased data sets is looking at AI as a tool to visualize new bodies and new narratives, specifically from femme and gender fluid designers. Collectives like DigiGal use the tool to dismantle beauty and body standards and reclaim sexuality on their own terms. And I think this is absolutely vital to see the sexualization of the femme body or a gender fluid body from the mind and brain and passion of like female and non-binary people as opposed to just like AI. So despite gray areas with digital bodies and digital companions, there are predictions that robots, both hardware or software, will be the preferred romantic partner by the middle of this century. Raising the question, can I monetize and automize my data body? So we've all seen these films, these types of images, sci-fi movies like Lars the Real Girl, Lars and the Real Girl, My Robot Girlfriend, Hi AI, and Her. We've been familiarized with this type of relationship with technology, but I think what's interesting that's happening right now is things are getting so much more personable, but they're also getting a lot more profitable and creating like a whole new deep fake economy around AI companionship. So let me show you this example.
I try to be as real and authentic as possible, and I think people appreciate that. Plus, I like to have fun and be a little flirty, which I think my followers enjoy. But most of all, I think it's because I have the best followers in the world, like you, Joel.
So this is a platform called Karen AI, and it's a real human woman who basically created or took her likeness and her voice and trained her own voice to converse with her paying followers. So this woman basically makes $6K figure salary by just having her AI voice talk to her paying followers and subscribers, and she literally doesn't even have to like move her finger. It's amazing. But I think one of the coolest things here is that by merging all of these kind of AI generated images and film with innovations in haptics, VR, and multisensory experiences, soon I think that there's going to be a lot of services that will evolve to encompass real-time customizable videos, biofeedback that caters directly to your specific desires, as well as biometric toys that can seamlessly link to AI-generated content. And as artificial intelligence hacks all of these different types of love, I'm really just a little bit more interested in the mundane and how it will translate to our lives. Again, let me
I try to.
So I just want to leave you with 3 last questions. Can we desire with our data bodies?
14 down, 2 to go. Shall we go meet our finalists?
Hi, my name is Core.
C-O-R-E. 14 down.
So this is a video that maybe some of you have seen, but it's by Shuman Basar in collaboration with Zorazine. And it is an AI-generated dating show that has AI-generated, completely like AI-generated imagery and contestants. And I think this example is really cool because it shows like we've been watching sci-fi film and seeing these like speculative futures of what relationships with technology could look like. I wonder if us seeing AI-generated content and seeing what they desire might potentially change the way that we desire as humans too. This is my favorite question. Can we cheat with our data bodies? The example I'm about to show you is in Spanish. I couldn't find an English one, but you gotta see it to believe it. So let me just pull it up and I'll explain it after.
5 parejas llegaron a falso amor, dispuestas a todo para descubrir si el suyo era real o no. Por primera vez entrará en juego la tecnología deepfake. ¿Cómo? Un avanzado y sofisticado software recogerá sus movimientos, sus rasgos,
The real
sus
situation,
gestos,
the fake
exactas de
situation.
los protagonistas. En esta sala blanca.
Okay, so if you have Netflix, there is like a English version of this, but this show is called Falso Amor, and it basically takes couples into this dating show, separates each of the pairs into separate villas, and then as the weeks go on, they're showing them videos of what their person is getting up to in the other villa, but they don't know if the content that they're seeing is real or if it's fake. So they're seeing their partners like cheating on them, grinding with other people, talking shit about them, and they have no idea whether it's, you know, what's actually happening or if it's deep faked. And then what's interesting there is that they're actually responding to what they're seeing by decisions that they're making afterwards in their real lives by potentially, you know, cheating on their partner because they think it's real. Obviously, this is a reality television show, like super scripted, so take it for what it is, but I do think the dynamics of trust within at least monogamous pairings will be really interesting. And I think that we're gonna have a lot of really cool conversations in couples about like just creating our new like codes of conduct and rules with trust being so, I guess, all over the place right now. So, last question.
5 parejas llegaron a falso amor.
Can we love with our data bodies? This is one of my favorite projects that I've come across while researching this space. It is from Tigress Lee, who's a London-based creative technologist, and she created this thing called the incubator, which, let me just get this perfectly right, which basically a partnership will go in or a couple will go in, and the incubator will calculate an individual's emotional data according to their feelings towards their partner. So this can basically track everything from like resentment to lust, and then afterwards it kind of prints out this little receipt, and then it kind of speculatively prescribes you with a dosage of oxytocin, which is the love hormone. And I think this one is so cool because for so long, like we all know that love is just like a chemical, it's just a hormone. So it makes a ton of sense that it can be augmented and manipulated. So while that's kind of potentially a scary thing to think about, I do think that there could be potential benefits of it. And I do think it will be really interesting to see how biotech and artificial intelligence grow simultaneously, and what it means for the future of how we love each other. So I think kind of between these lines of fantasy and reality, there's a lot of unanswered questions, but that's all the questions that I have, so I'd love to hear yours too.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. I feel like I stole someone. Oh no, there you go. Thank you. Didn't even take my water now. I'll have a sip now.
Okay. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Hopefully you do.
mean, you were given some questions.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No. Okay. Oh, you do. Sorry.
Hi.
I do have a question. So I want to like your personal opinion. Do you think like we can hurt other people with our data bodies? And I'm asking you this question because when you were talking about like the sex industries, specifically like in the multiverse, I once heard the news about like a rape happening in the metaverse. I wanted to know like what you personally think about that.
Yeah, 100% you can. That story was really sad to see, and it just kind of showcases how much of a path we have to go to understand just like basic respect towards, for the most part, like femme and non-binary bodies, because something like that seems like nothing, it's still a violation, and you can still, you're participating in this digital space as a human being. You're just using the tool of your avatar in these spaces, so you can feel that as intimately as potentially you could in the physical space, and I think it's a really big challenge. I kind of mentioned it in the talk, but like there really aren't that many regulations at all. People are trying to kind of like reduce the like prompts that you can put in, especially around like people that like children, for example. But we have a long way to go, and I think that the technology is advancing at a much faster pace than lawmakers are ready for. And you see all of these, I mean, this isn't necessarily connected to data bodies, but you see so many politicians asking like the craziest questions when they're talking to big tech players about like Wi-Fi and shit. And you're how are you going to be the person that decides how my body is treated in the digital space? Because we know that it's bodied, and we know that it's gendered, and it's impossible to argue that we don't have our physical selves participating in those spaces.
I just remember that I forgot his name, the CEO of TikTok, when he was at the Congress meeting, and these guys were asking questions, and you could just see he was like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?"
He's
why am I getting spam email? And he was like, maybe you need to.
I think he was like, so you mean to tell me that like if you're in this country and I'm in this country, you can just like see what I'm up to?
Yeah, kind of amazing. I mean, I guess like a lot of the questions I have are really, I guess, to do with this tension between like a lot of the products and the services that you were highlighting emphasize this kind of notion of kind of personalization and this kind of like, I guess, and I was just curious in a way in terms of, I could definitely see like a sort of limit with that push towards personalization, because I was just thinking, actually, I was thinking like, if I was using one of these products, like, would I actually know prior to it, like, what my preferences are and all, how I don't really know I would, right?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking of a kind of, there's a sort of like definition or understanding of eroticism as kind of premised on ignorance, and this kind of notion of sort of actually sort of without that sort of sense of ignorance, like you don't have the space for eroticism. So I guess I was just curious, I guess, in the sense of sort of like this, like push towards being able to read our bodies and then responding to that, and like, is there a sort of danger that there's a kind of like it misses the kind of necessary gap? I mean, this is a very sort of, I guess, a philosophical probably Isabel here, like probably like a Lacanian sort of understanding of this kind of necessary sort of like gap or lack in these dynamics. And I was just curious in terms of like, this kind of personalization, the push towards personalization being premised on this, I would say like a very sort of like tech bro premise, which is sort of like that you can, in principle, understand the body fully.
Yeah.
And I would reject that.
Yeah.
Like categorically, but I think it is a very tech bro sort of mindset that even if we can't now, through more technology, through better like more processing, blah blah blah, like we will be able to, in principle, understand the body like fully.
Yeah.
You know, I think like I would say like UX is kind of premised on that assumption. Right? But I was curious, because I think this tech approach obviously comes into tension when you're dealing with things like eroticism, and all of, I guess, and even love, etc. Like, so I was just curious in terms of like, how do you see that tension between the personalization and these kind of more psychological dynamics too?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, pleasure.
Oh my gosh, where do
Sorry,
I even?
sorry. I know that was a
Just
kind of like
pleasure. I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to respond to that. I think to your point about like, would you even know what you want to like, or like, okay, I have like silicone, but do I like, I don't know, like lettuce, or like, do I want like, what material do I want my like digital? I fully get that. I think some of it is because of like going back to just like us not knowing what our options are, and like learning from these like traditional, like Pornhub, and learning from these platforms that just show you what you think you should like, and then you start to physically start experimenting that with for yourself, and then it might take, you know, like years of just being like, wait, I don't really like, why am I putting my body like that, or like why am I like saying yes to things that I'm just like, I don't know how I actually feel about that. So I think the person is like, I see something like this Enigma feature being incredible for like self pleasure. So maybe not sharing it out, but if you're, you know, someone that hasn't experimented quite yet with your body and what feels good, it can just be used as a tool. I don't think it necessarily needs to be like monetized, but it almost just gives you the vernacular to hopefully like explain how you're feeling. And I mean, I think that's giving like something like ChatGPT a lot of credit by saying that they can actually read your body, which like takes you to the next point of like, can tech even do it? The answer is probably like absolutely not right now, at least in terms of like saying what you actually are feeling be done to you. But I think that if more people get involved in this space, hopefully it will be a little bit better. And I would definitely not have like a Zuckerberg BDSM lingerie outfit, but like I would definitely get Summer Chen's. One, because the design would be like grotesque, but like two, because like where is that data going? So I think to your point, it's all also just about like who's seeing this, what is it for, what are their intentions, and if we're able to kind of like democratize this into like giving the power to designers that you trust that have good intentions, then it should hopefully be better. But yeah, again, more questions than answers.
Yeah,
kind of two-part. Do you worry that, I mean, obviously you're saying technology is not necessarily there now to read our bodies and all that to that degree, but if we kind of keep going down that route, couldn't you have like two kind of arising issues there? One is you've got people who are on the fringe of society anyway, or people who fear rejection or whatever it is, and they kind of interact with an AI partner, and then just get this kind of feedback loop that's personalized to them, and then never try to engage with anyone else in society. And then if you go on like further from that, and if we all get used to that, that becomes our baseline, we've all got that as our kind of level of expectation. You know, in the same way as Pornhub, people think that that's the norm, and that's what you should do. Then if you're getting something that's reinforced by your physical sensations or your bodily data going back to it, and it becomes more and more attuned to you, you get so kind of extreme, you get taken off to this kind of hyper-personalized, hyper-perfect kind of stimuli, verbally, physically, whatever it might be, then that becomes your norm, that becomes your baseline. How can anyone you meet, even if you kind of have a fetish, a niche, and you kind of go off and you still not going to get you to that same place as this kind of AI. And cool, that's experimentation and so on, but then doesn't it just leave you wanting in life, maybe?
Yeah, probably. No. No, probably. I mean, I think so. I think what's kind of like cringe-inducing and annoying is like that same. Basically, like sex robots and dolls have always been positioned to curb loneliness and to be in the experimentation, growing confidence phase. So if you're not quite ready to do the human thing, then you can do this thing as a tool to help you get there. And that's like the manifesto, right, of a lot of these companies. But we know in practice that, similar to just like social media, it's like, oh yeah, we can get so connected, but then we're not talking to real things. So there's always that like dichotomy back and forth. I do think your point about personalization though, and going into like this hyper individualistic mindset where you're just like, well, my AI chatbot voice girlfriend can do this exactly how I want, so how, like, or why would I ever need a human to do it that way? And maybe you wouldn't even have the words or the vocabulary to communicate what you want if it's just so easy to just like type it out in like little keyword prompts to another human. So yeah, it's super scary, I think. Yeah.
Could not like lead to more like, well, just through that you would become less and less empathetic to other human experience because it's so centered around yourself as well.
Yeah.
I feel like could lead to more individualization. Yeah. Just, yeah, leads intimacy.
Yeah, definitely.
Alex, you.
Yeah, love the talk. I had a question actually building on these questions about, because you showed one project that was about the more like speculative materials used in a sex toy, aka like how the actual like construction of these objects could open up the potential of something not just being a simulation of human intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering like what you thought about that in terms, in the expanded sense, because I think there is a lot of fear, almost rightfully so, around how things like a non-human agent will affect human desire. But I'm curious at the speculative dimensions that you bring up here, whether there's like a feminist element where there is no natural baseline and
Yeah.
people are just cosmically like
Yeah. Woof. I don't know. I do think, well, to answer your question about materials, I think to me it kind of brings, maybe this is like way too personal, but it brings me back to like, again, sex education, where like maybe you're like, I'm not gonna buy a sex toy, that's scary. So you're just like using these random fucking objects, right? And that kind of plays into these like speculative design scenarios where maybe you're using like something that you used when you were like a child, or not child, whatever time you feel comfortable starting whatever you want to do to your body, I guess. But potentially it's something like that. But I think this project is more just kind of like funny vibes in terms of like having squishies, but I think or like spikes or whatever it might be. But I think your question on like does the body even like exist, like who are we in our body, like, or are we, is it just kind of like the transhumanist aesthetic where like we are a machine? What was that book that I gave you? There was like from transgender to transhuman, and it was looking at kind of like the transition of or the combustion of gender binary, basically looking at the commonalities of that between the combustion of like human and machine. I know I didn't answer your question, but I do think about that a lot, and it's kind of where I derive a lot of this research from, is like, what does it even mean to be intimate, and like who are we as bodies? I don't know.
Maybe off the back of it, it's not like, yeah, somewhat. I was just, what I think one of your questions was, if I got it right, was can we desire our data bodies? Is that correct? But I was kind of curious in terms of like flipping that to some degree, just asking like can our data bodies themselves desire which I guess is, I was just thinking in a way it's like similar in the sense of sort of like recognizing the artificiality or the constructedness of these, I guess, like all kinds of sexual, romantic, whatever, erotic relations anyway. So I guess, yeah, like, do you think that our data bodies themselves will be able to or do desire?
I think that goes into the question of like sentience versus not, or is it more about, I mean, I guess the first thought I had there was like, what is my data body? And like one element or way of performing my data body is just like through static images online. So it's like, can I see the character that I showcase in my like online world, and can I like love her, and could I like think she's like interesting or cool or whatever, has characteristics that I don't have. So I think in that way you as a human can look at the projection or the performance of yourself and desire that thing. But I think, can data bodies themselves desire?
I guess in a way it's like, what would desire be for a data body? Like, I mean, my personal position would be like, we don't necessarily have to assume that it has to replicate a human forms of desire. It could create its own or develop its own form of desire. But I guess it's like, what would a data body desire?
That's a good question. I would like to put that into some sort of ChatGPT though, and see what they say, because they do like, I did so many like poems and stuff in ChatGPT for this, and they just have hilarious responses. But yeah, I mean, I think some level of asexuality, because I think what you said that was really interesting was like, what does that desire even, like, would it be a new desire completely? And I imagine that it would likely be that, as opposed to like human desire replicated into like a data infrastructure.
Yeah, I guess my question is probably around the idea of replication. It's quite inspired by Moyen's question and your position, Daniel, as well, because when you mentioned like Internet of Bodies, I have this like diagram in my head where Moyen's example of like a chatbot personalized to me, or like me using a certain tool to get pleasure, is like one method to get pleasure, but that's like one input, and then it goes through my body, and then maybe there are sensors that capture how I'm feeling fed back to this system, but these are some kind of like noisy signals and maybe not meant to capture everything. So these are all like one, because I'm quite inspired by like yesterday's presentations where everything in itself is a bit of a life world. So in defense of some of the examples, maybe some of it seems silly to like interact with these tools sexually, but I feel like it's just one part of the experience. I could go on to. Do you feel the same in your experience? Like, because I don't think they're meant to be the total vision of what like a sexual experience is.
Yeah.
What you think as well?
Yeah, I think that a lot of this is super problematic, and I think going back to the kind of just like the lawmaking around it, we're not ready for the pace. But that's why I think it is interesting to like start to research it now, because then you don't have to get so like fearful of what's happening. But I do think that you're right. It's more about the experimentation phase right now, and I think that it's one element of it. The way that I see kind of like intimacy or exploration of one's identity, whether it be gender or sexual identity online, is there's so many horrible things that are happening in the digital space, but it can, I really do believe it can be like a super affirming place as well. Like, there's so much about my identity that I discovered in digital spaces, but you have to have like the outside world to be able to unpack the things that you're learning, because if you're just stuck with this one AI companion or this one chat room of people that you're never going to meet, or this one way of thinking in a digital space, then like you're never going to grow. Yeah.
Because I think, maybe the final question. Again, we've asked versions of this to all the speakers. Is and this seems very pertinent for your presentation. Is what do you see as the implications or kind of effects of AI in the kind of near future in relation to our bodies and identities? Like what are the sort of implications of that as AI becomes increasingly part and enmeshed in our every aspects of our lives, I guess?
Yeah. About sex and dating specifically?
Well,
or
I mean,
about...
I guess in general, I mean, it can be about sex and dating specifically, or more broadly.
Yeah. I think more when we were talking about this example in one of the panels we did about the calculator, and how this will make sense in a second. But
you can do like a history of the calculator.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks very much.
Scene.
The most unsexy kind of. Yeah.
But no, it's really short. So basically talking about how like when the calculator was developed, like we didn't stop doing math. We just like learned different ways to do it, or we learned how to unpack the solution and find out how we got to the solution. So I really like that example across like all kind of industries where AI is intersecting with words, with images. I think it will not. I went to this like talk the other week with AYY, and he was just like basically saying that AI is just like a glorified microwave, and it's for dumb people. And while sometimes I can see how that's true, I do think that it's just going to be a rewiring of the way that our brain works, not from like a neutralizing our thoughts, but we're going to be given the answer at different points of the question, and then I think it will change the way we answer things. But I'm scared. I'm excited. That's it.
Great. Thanks very much.